Ladies and gentlemen, now it's too late with Alan Mosley.
Guys, welcome back for another episode of It's Too Late. I am your host, Alan Mosley, joined as always by the number one producer in late night. It's Sherry Voluntary. Sherry, how are you doing? Yeah, you should get that big foam finger thing.
I know the number one.
Yeah. Woo! We really need to discuss our bits and our props before we start the show, I think.
Yeah, we should. We always talk about having them, but just talk about having them when it's on time for air.
We talk about having them, but we talk about having them literally in front of the audience as we're doing the show. So you guys look at Sherry and you visualize if she had one of those big foam weird number one fingers that you know.
I mean, I have big hands, but
not
quite that big. I think we should start a wish list.
Okay.
And that can be on there, and someone, Andrew Avery or someone, can send us a foam number one finger.
I mean, my wish list right now is just like to have a place. So
that's having a home is probably a good wish.
So here's the thing. So we had this whole big bit last week about Flag Day and about Ted Cruz and how he had done this thing about the Pledge of Allegiance, and we didn't get around to it. And to be honest, that was a week ago. I don't even remember anything before Tuesday, to be totally honest with you. So I'm not going to sit here and try to think about what it was that ruined the bit, but we believe in recycling on this program. And by believe in recycling, I mean we don't have the time and money to do another monologue. So we're just going to take last week's monologue and do it over. So you might have seen that Ted Cruz was in the news. Do we have a picture of Ted Cruz? No, that's silly. Do we have a picture? Yeah, that's him. So there's Ted. So Ted Cruz was making this big stink because it was Flag Day, and he does this little video. You know, he's got some staffer who's having to funnel his hog when his wife's not around, is sitting there with their cell phone, and they're taking a video of him sitting in front of the flag doing the Pledge of Allegiance, right? And his caption underneath the video was, "This didn't used to be controversial."
Except for when it was first made.
I mean, it just goes to show you where he is as a person, as a politician, that he let's visualize, let's put ourselves in the shoes of Ted Cruz for a moment. So you get to work, and you know it's you get to work, but knowing Ted, because let's face it, he's not the brightest crayon in the tool shed. So he's probably thinking the night before, hey, tomorrow's Flag Day. I should do something. I should do something. Now when he says do something, he doesn't mean repeal the AUMF. He doesn't mean in the Patriot Act. He doesn't mean rein in government spending.
Good things.
What he means by do something, he doesn't mean visit euthanasia.com/Ted. No. What he means is do a retarded publicity stunt in front of the flag that's only going to appeal to the furthest right boomers in your yeah.
He's a boomer bro.
I was going to say in your constituency, but the word congregation was in my mind. But you know what? That works. The farthest right boomers in his congregation. Yeah.
Exactly.
So to avoid getting deplatformed, because we've been a little spicy lately, and I've actually gotten a couple of messages from people saying, hey, you better watch out. Better rein it in. You're going to get in trouble. So instead of me saying something, what's that phrase? Don't tell people, show them. So instead, take a look at this. And that's what we think about Ted Cruz. I feel like that graphic is going to reappear on the program in the future.
I feel like it is pretty
If you're just now tuning in and you missed the first part of the monologue, you've missed the best part of this damn episode.
Shame on you.
Shame. For shame, Jonathan Carranza, our social media expert.
Yeah.
Now Jonathan's like, that's it. Now I'm logging off for another week. So there was another thing that I saw in the news that I wanted to touch on in the monologue, because, really the monologue is reserved for things that I don't feel like ranting about for a whole segment, because I don't really care that much. but
Mm.
but you can't help but see it. You know, it's like those things, you see it, you can't help but see it. And so you might remember, I guess a year or more ago now, that Disney had announced they're doing a live action remake of The Little Mermaid. But Ariel's not going to be played by some petite little ginger white girl. No, 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 no.
Right.
She's going to be played by someone that Don Imus wouldn't approve of, if you remember him. And that's and so
the younger folks aren't going to get that.
yeah, well,
Youngers.
If you don't get it, just Google Little Mermaid live action Ariel and you'll have your answer. And it's not gonna be what you expect. But the thing is that you kind of get this feeling from Disney, because let's face it, outside of them buying Marvel and buying Star Wars, they have no more ideas, right? Like Disney has no ideas. Hollywood has no ideas. So it seems pretty clear to me that they're basically going to eventually over time take their entire like classic catalog and remake it with live action. They've already done like Lion King and Aladdin and some other ones. But they've announced they're going to do a live action of Snow White. And Snow White, which you'll recall is a little white brunette European girl, is going to be replaced by a Colombian actress. Not Colombian as where I'm from. Colombia, where they have cocaine instead of crack. We have crack instead of cocaine. They have cocaine instead of crack.
That one's kind of fitting then.
Yeah.
Colombia and Snow White.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing is that, again, I'm not one of these people who feels like that's so important for me that like that's my cause. My cause is not what races and ethnicities are representing Disney princesses. For some people out there, that is their cause.
Right, yes.
That's not really my cause. But the thing is that the issue is not that they're reimagining these classic stories. The reason is why.
Yes.
It's the reason why they're doing it is the issue. And we also know, I had used the analogy with a friend of mine that, you know, they already did Aladdin, but say they were going to do a live action of Aladdin. But instead of it taking place in Persia or modern day Iraq or Iran, and say they were going to basically take the entire plot word for word, but they were going to move it into turn of the previous millennium Ireland, and it was going to be an entirely white, you know, Irish or Western European cast.
Pasty.
Yeah, but the plot would be all the same, but the names and the location would be moved around. And even to drive the point home, what if whatever evil guy is standing in for Jafar, what if the person playing Jafar, all the other characters are white Irish people, but the character playing Jafar was like a Spaniard of Muslim descent? You would never, ever hear the end of the outrage, would you?
Correct.
That would be 24/7 news for as long as for months that they did that.
I could see them like, you know, they interrupt your program for this special report. Like when the Challenger blew up when I was in 4th grade or something. That's what it would be. It would be like that'd be so great.
Well, I had even said, you know, the only thing that they would report in the news other than that is, I wonder how Donald Trump is connected to the new Disney film. That would be the only thing you would hear on TV. And so, again, the moral of the story is, it's not that they do it, although, to be honest with you, I don't like that they do it. I'll be honest with you. It's the reasons why they do it. And then the last point I would make is that, you know, again, obviously, they don't have the creative capability or the confidence in their decisions to make new material with different representation being the focus of the material. They don't want to do it with they can't write new characters and new stories using different types of representation. They have to take old stories and retcon them to shove their modern day identity politics into it. And my friend had mentioned to me that, well, you know, the thing is that with a lot of the classic Disney stories, a lot of those are European folklore. a
Mm-hmm.
lot of those
Snow White and Rose
genuinely,
Red.
genuinely, it's not that they just made a lot of those characters white because they were all horrible racists. It was
Right.
because a lot of that stuff originates from Western Europe, Central Europe, Eastern Europe, and that would natively be the characters in the story.
The reason why Aladdin is set in the Middle East
Very,
is because the source material
very
was
so.
Middle
The
Eastern.
the fact that they did Aladdin and it has Middle Eastern representation tells you that they actually, on some level, they thought, and I'm not saying that there's not exceptions, but on some level, they did have some true to form to where the source material comes from.
Right.
But again, that's not a two-way street. That's not a quid pro quo.
Right.
We're not going to remake The Little Mermaid and Snow White and then turn around and remake the Irish Aladdin. That's not going to happen. And it'll
Right.
never happen. And we don't have to get ourselves deplatformed. You know why that's never going to happen,
Yes.
and I know why that's never going to happen.
And I think also they don't like it seems more disrespectful to me that they don't even respect the stories enough to or the people there are enough stories about minorities and people all around the world and trans people and gay people and whatever. There are enough of their actual stories
Mm-hmm.
that they could tell and make new stories, but they don't even respect them enough to do that. They just plug those people into old stories, and that's why people get so upset because for one, they've wanted you to love these stories, right? Snow White is a classic because people loved it. It's appeals to all people, and they wanted you to love it then, but now they're telling you that it was somehow bad, but it's still dear to people in a lot of ways. So I just think it's a little bit it's disingenuous and it's disrespectful because there are so many good stories. Like take this is a comic book one, okay, but Black Panther I thought was incredible. It was a great story and it had a lot of, the classic story tropes that people enjoy, and it was really good, and it was about Black people and a Black culture. And why can't they do that more? That makes more sense to me, is to write actual stories about, or fictional, about people
A-
of those walks of life living them.
Apparently, they can't do it more because it gives you cancer. But I mean, what they should do is they should remake Gilmore Girls in inner city Baltimore.
Right. And
That's
then
that's what
yeah.
that's what they should do. That's just a shout out to our friends Celeste and Derek. By the way, they're
Yeah.
rolling over
Thank
wherever
you.
they are. Guys, we're gonna be
Mhm.
right back with the meme of the week and the viewer mail right after this break. Don't go away. Hey Sherry,
Yes.
what time is it?
Meme of the week, baby. It's a trap.
That is like the Caucasian human male version of Akbar right there, I think. I
Right.
tell you what, folks, the LP is a trap. It's a complete waste of your time and money. This isn't an LP episode, so I'm not going to go there, but I saw that, so I decided that was going to be the meme of the week. But since we're on that, it seems like this whole thing comes down to there's these two camps, and one camp cares about, for a simplistic way of putting it, politics, and one camp cares about messaging. And the thing is that where I stand, where I think a lot of people stand, is they remember the great Harry Brown and how well he represented the party. And all I can say is I really wish the LP would have followed the footsteps of Harry Brown. And by that I mean died. By the way, Sherry, this is why you're better than Suzanne, because Suzanne would have just sat there in stunned silence.
With her mouth. I could just see it now. She'd be like,
yeah. Well, she would be thinking to herself, should I say something or should I not incriminate myself, perhaps? Let's answer some viewer mail.
Right.
Let's answer some viewer mail, Sherry. Jesus Christ. No. Turn it off. Turn it off. When I say, no, turn it off. Jesus. When I say, hey, Sherry, what time is it? And you say meme of the week, you do meme of the week. Yes. And then when I say, let's answer some viewer mail, you do viewer mail. I don't say, let's do some viewer mail, and then you say, perhaps later in the evening, if time permits.
I clicked the wrong button, and then I had to. Yeah.
I swear to God, if anyone ever sees my eyes darting that way, it's because like the production booth is over there, and I can see this woman. I can see her, and literally as from my mouth to God's ear, I'm seeing her, and the look on her face is, how can I wreck this program?
Right, yes.
Sherry,
exactly.
Let's answer some viewer mail.
Okay. I like that new song.
My mouth to God's ear, Sherry. Because he's listening, you know. He's listening. Not to all of us, just to me. So, Andrew Avery writes, Dear Alan and Sherry, does a photon carry luggage or is it traveling light? Jesus Christ. So, I'm not going to have any commentary. So for the audience at home, if you need to, hit pause, go to Google, type in photons, and here you go.
I think our audience is smart enough to get that joke.
You think so, do you?
Yeah, I mostly.
Adam Sakozen writes, Dear Alan and Sherry, would you let your significant other have the password to your phone? I would, but I'm cheating because I actually don't even have a password on my phone.
Well, there you go.
If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear, Adam.
Right. I never would ask, and my ex never asked. Like, it's just not a thing. We respect each other's privacy. So if you're insecure, then you probably shouldn't be in a relationship with that person. Just saying.
Well, there you go. So my answer is I don't have a password, and Sherry's answer is just live alone.
I'm divorced.
Yeah. So Rocco Baxter Benner, right, who's a literal dog, by the way.
Dog, yeah.
Writes, Dear Alan and Sherry, will you take down the Libertarian Party? Well, if Dave nominates me from the floor, we'll see. We'll see what we can do. I mean,
do it, Dave. Do it.
But that would require me actually going to the convention, and like, if you guys GoFund me like my trip to the convention so that I can be, for the sole purpose of being nominated from the floor with no campaign, just so that they have to give me like my 5 or 10 minute speech. I'll do a stump speech.
Or he could Skype it in on his phone.
Euthanasia, like we'll have to work with the folks at the website to get euthanasia.com/LP. I'll direct everyone there as I'm talking. Yeah. So yes. Clay Davis writes, Dear Alan and Sherry, can you name a band or performer that you love as a guilty pleasure that others might criticize you for? Do you have any guilty pleasure music, Sherry?
Yes. And okay. So Rihanna.
Okay.
I know. That song, like, Work. I freaking love that song. Like, I'm not a huge Rihanna fan, but that song, I love, like, Jamaican dance hall music too, and that song that she did, the patois, I love it. I can't help myself.
What was the song?
Work,
Work.
work, work, work,
Oh,
work,
okay.
work. Remember that?
She got worked. Got worked. Tim Weissong writes, well, you know what? I like to just skip over questions I don't feel like answering. I feel like you should
Yeah,
be the target of people's criticism and not me.
exactly.
Um, I mean, I like jazz, but that's the music I like, and some people are like,
Right,
yeah, so
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Tim Weissong writes, Dear Alan and Sherry, what was the first R-rated movie you saw, and did you see it in the theater? I know this one. This is a question I actually have an answer for. The first R-rated movie I saw was Terminator 2: Judgment Day.
Oh wow.
Yeah, which is a great one.
Yeah, it is a great movie.
Yeah.
I I remember my first R-rated movie. It was Dune
Oh,
because
yeah.
we went to see some movie. I don't even remember what the original movie was. And I was about 6 or 7, I think, maybe,
Hmm.
if that old. And we didn't like the movie, and so Dune was playing next door. And my uncle, who I was with, he's a few years older than me, was like, we walked over to the next theater and saw it, and I've been in love with that movie ever since. Like,
Huh.
I know a lot of people don't like it. I love it.
Are
So,
you gonna see the remake?
oh, of course,
Okay.
yeah, I'm definitely gonna see
Okay.
the remake and
Um,
judge it harshly.
we only have a couple minutes left, so let's just do all the
All
rest
right,
of the questions.
speed
Uh,
round.
Patty Weimers writes, Patty's doing a question this week.
Patty,
Patty says,
Patty.
Dear Alan and Sherry, is a slug a homeless snail? Um, I mean,
I mean,
it's food if you're hungry enough.
it's food if you're French.
Yeah,
If you're French enough.
if you're, it's those simple bare necessities. You know. Um, I feel like we could sing the song, but we don't.
I
But we
know.
don't have the rights to the song, and so I don't know if us performing an a cappella is enough to
Right.
get us
What if
flagged.
we just wrap it?
No, that's how you get worked. So no. Um, Rachel Watson Kennerly writes, Dear Alan and Sherry, what is your one deviation? So your one deviation from your hardcore, strict, principled libertarianism, Sherry. What's your one deviation?
Um, I don't have a
Oh,
deviation.
bullshit.
I can't think of one right now. I don't know.
Of all the sharp and terrible truths that Sherry Voluntary delivers to you guys week in and week out, she's lying about this.
I mean, I'm sure there is one. I I can't think about it at the moment. I can't think of one. So ask my ex-husband. I'm sure he could tell you.
So
His is Borders, by the way, just so you know.
I happen to know that. Um,
Yeah.
so my one deviation is that it's not that I totally believe in the non-aggression principle, but some people need to get got.
Yeah. Oh, I agree with that. I guess maybe we have the same one then, because
Okay.
some folks, but the people who I think need to get got are people who have aggressed anyway. So that's not really a deviation, is it?
I mean, I think that too, but I add so many more to the list. Is my thing. I'll give you one recent example. If you own a rental property and you list like you're managing an apartment complex and you list apartments for lease at different prices only so that people will click on the link so that you can tell them, oh, actually that's not available. But we have this one for twice as much. You actually should be shot, I think.
Line them up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll give you another one. If you're this is boomer right here. This is how you could tell a boomer wrote an advertisement. If they literally write in the advertisement, "Wow!" exclamation mark. That's how you know a boomer wrote that copy, my friends.
True.
So there you
That's
go.
true.
And they got it. They got to go. They got to go.
Yeah.
The Lysander Spooner knows where
They
they're
will
going.
soon enough. Yeah.
Glenn Horowitz writes, Dear Alan and Sherry, are the American people any closer to what people aligned with Claire Wolfe refer to as Claire time? So I think what Glenn is talking about, so Claire Wolfe, one of her famous quotes is that it's too late to work within the system, but it's too early to start shooting the bastards. And so we're in
Right.
this really weird time. This has become a violent segment, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
And it's
if they
not Glenn's
only
fault. We
knew.
were kind of already there.
Yeah, we're kind of.
He's just fanning the flames. So I actually would say no, people are not closer to that, because just because you have ascended to a point that you can see the grift and the corruption and systemic problems. No. I mean,
Right.
the people who see the problems are not running out to vote for president, and yet this past presidential election had more people vote in it than ever. So no.
Right.
No, they don't get it.
Yeah, I think the very fact that people are still like, you see a lot of the Republicans now who are upset about everything, and so they're getting angry, and people see that as a sign of them getting a little more, woke, if you will, for the right things. But their solution is, we got to get another president in, we got to get Trump back in office or something. So that right there tells you they ain't there.
They ain't there.
They ain't there.
They ain't there, Glenn. And finally, last question. Eric Eli writes, "Dear Alan and Sherry." Ooh. Eric gave us two questions, but the first one was a softball. I'm going out of my way to go to the question that I won't answer, but I'll let you answer. Is there a difference between God's will and what God wants? You look like Suzanne.
Right. I guess you have to believe there's a God for him to want things for you.
You're going to burn.
Yeah, well, I mean, I used to believe, and I'm agnostic now, I don't know, but I think that God gave you free will, right? It's as a response to his love that you do things for him and want to be in his service or whatever. So I don't think that answers it, but there you go.
So I would say that there is a difference between God's will and what God wants, because what God's will is for you to come to that realization on your own. But if you don't, then that's obviously not what he wanted. Because
I mean, my former Christianity never believed that anyway, so.
Yeah, but your former Christianity was, I mean, you're one David Koresh away from not being on the program. So, guys, we're going to be back after this break with John Odermatt of Lions of Liberty. Stick around. Your ad could be playing right now, reaching thousands of potential customers. Sadly, it's not, but it could be. Find out how to be an advertised sponsor for It's Too Late with Alan Mosley. Email us at info@alanmosley.tv. Guys, welcome back to the show. Our guest this evening is the host of Finding Freedom over on the Lions of Liberty Network. But I'll have you know, he's the brains of the operation, but don't tell the other guys. It's John Odermatt. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here. I'm the brains, the brawn, basically the whole thing at Lions of Liberty. Just kidding.
But beauty too.
The brawn and the best hair, because you're the only one that knows how to keep his cut.
Well, yeah, Mark, I can't compete with Mark's, long, luxurious locks, but Brian has no hair, so we got the extremes. I'm the happy medium there.
You're the glue that's holding it all together. Then we'll go with that. How about that?
Exactly.
So I want to start right off the bat with Finding Freedom. So for people that have been following you for long enough, and for those who maybe not know, once upon a time there was a show called Felony Friday. And by the way, that just reeks of somebody who takes criminal justice problems as sort of their pet project. And I love people who kind of have their main focus. That was something you and I think, talked about a little bit very recently, as people that kind of have a really sharp focus. So tell me a little bit about Finding Freedom and how we got there from Felony Friday, and a little bit of your sort of personal touch on everything.
Yeah, man. We talked about this, your evolution with your shows on when you were in Finding Freedom, which will air I believe the day after this airs this week. So, but kind of similar. I got started down the path with um, Felony Friday. Some things happened, not to me directly, but people in my life got tied up in the criminal justice system. And also at the same time, I kind of had my eyes open to really just the stigma, and the stigma that I was painting on other people who had been to prison. And it kind of all came to a culmination. And it began with writing articles about the criminal justice system, just pointing out, ridiculous sentencing and things of that nature. And as Lions of Liberty moved into podcasting, Mark Claire started first. He started the podcast by accident, interviewed Stephen Kinsella, and somehow a podcast started. And after we realized, wait a minute, Mark is getting thousands of people watching or listening to a podcast, and we're getting 100 people reading our articles, maybe we should start a podcast too. So I turned Felony Friday into podcast form, not knowing what direction I was going to go into. And just sort of by dumb luck, I ended up meeting up with some very influential people in the clemency reform movement who were able to connect me with a lot of people who were just getting out of prison on pardons or clemency and things of that nature, and just had some completely insane stories to share about, conspiracy crimes. A lot of people don't know. I'm sure, the libertarians out there listening know all about conspiracy law and how you can be sentenced to decades in prison without any drugs being found or really any real evidence. You can get convicted just based on, in some cases, ghost dope, or someone just testifying that, they bought so much off of you, and there's really nothing else that has to be behind it. And of course, the government, the federal agents can cut deals with people to testify against you and put you away in prison. And that happens to a lot of people. So I went down that path with Felony Friday, like you were talking about, having a singular focus. It's awesome in a way because you can pour everything into it, and you're really getting involved with the questioning and growing in getting better, interviewing people from that background and pulling really powerful stories out of them. But after doing 250 episodes, I think, or I don't know how many I did before I switched, something like that. Close to 250 episodes. You kind of, it's not that it gets old, but I started to feel like I was limiting my growth, and I needed some sort of change. And this kind of all came about during the COVID times, and being, actually it was during the COVID times. I don't know, everything runs together. Anyway, all this is coming together, and I'm seeing with COVID these aggressive government lockdowns. And I wanted to interview people who were suffering from lockdowns, or, had lost their business, or, different things like that had happened. So I needed some room to sort of spread my wings and not totally stop interviewing people who have been through the criminal justice system, been through that ringer. That's something I will always be passionate about and will always care about. But, I really think I was hindering my own ability to tell stories and reach a wider audience. And one thing that I didn't really realize until I got into it, but when you talk about the stigma of felons and the stigma that is attached to people who've been formerly incarcerated, that stigma was also attached to my podcast. People wouldn't listen just because it was called Felony Friday. I don't want to hear about stories from people who've been to prison. So as you kind of take that stigma away, I can call it Finding Freedom, and still bring on people who have been to prison and maybe reach a different audience. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Well, I find that very interesting. So our fans know that we're actually right in the middle of producing a 3-part miniseries called Out of Order, where it's going to talk about issues with the criminal justice system from and I'll tell you, it was inspired. Our good friend Suzanne Sherman, who was a practicing attorney, and has all sorts of terrible stories to tell. She had inspired, she said, "Hey, Alan, you should go on Netflix. You should watch this documentary called The Innocence Files." And it was about the Innocence Project and a number of guys that got off decades later. And what was so great, what was so interesting about it is, when you're sitting there, you're sitting there talking to these guys who they lived it, right? Like these are people who, and by the way, just as a quick aside, I'm so blown away by how many of those guys were managed to come out of on the other side with purpose. And I guess just so happy to be alive and free that they're very positive. And I know that a lot, myself included, I know a lot of us might look at that and think, man, if that were me, I would just be so angry and resentful and full of hatred. But the thing about that particular documentary was it revolved around the cases of these different gentlemen who were caught up in these false accusations. But it wasn't so much about them as it was about how did they get here? Like, why are we talking about them? And so that the real story was, look at how they're conducting investigations. Look at the flimsy evidence. Look at the court system, how it just chews people up. Look at the appeals process. Examine some of these myths like burden of proof and presumption of innocence, and how depending on some of the details of who, where, when, those things, I really do genuinely consider a lot of that myth. It's really not true when you look at some of the flimsy cases that got people put away, and then vice versa, how incredibly hard they have to work to then in appeal prove their innocence. I'm sure you're familiar with that then the burden is placed on them to not just prove doubt, but prove innocence. And it's an incredibly high threshold when, in theory, the threshold should have been equally high for them to be put away. But oftentimes that's unfortunately not the case because they're getting the wrong guys. And so that's definitely something I'm really passionate about too. But I want you to, kind of moving on from that a little bit, talk a little bit about some of the recent things you've highlighted on Finding Freedom. And specific, and not me, by the way. I'm not that much of an egotistical asshole. Not me on Finding Freedom, but some of the interesting things that you've brought up on Finding Freedom, and how maybe it's a similar story to me in that maybe it's a little bit of a catharsis where you can just be swallowed up by so much negativity and depression resulting around things that you feel hopeless to combat or control, and you need an outlet. You need to have an avenue to move on to bigger and better things.
Yeah, it like I said, I needed some room to sort of sometimes with podcasting or with any sort of media, you don't really know what direction you want to go into until you start to go in a different direction, and it just kind of
Sure.
you can kind of gather some steam and momentum as you go. And that's kind of what I did with the switch to Finding Freedom. And like I talked about, and I'll get more specific with the one case, but I wanted, especially with COVID, to talk to some business owners. So I talked to a local business owner here in Pennsylvania who struggled with the lockdowns, owned multiple gyms in the area, and he actually had his local county offer him a loan or some sort of grant. I guess it was a grant of some, not much, like $1,000, $2,000. And he was all ready to sign the papers. And they said, okay, all you have to do is just agree to follow any of the mandates coming down from the governor in the future. It's like, whoa, wait a minute here. I'm not signing away to that. So he decided not to take the grant. And what the government did is they leaked it to a local paper that this guy was not taking the money, and they insinuated that he did not ever want to follow any sort of mandates and was operating a dangerous business and these sorts of things. So just crazy stuff like that. I mean, I just get connected with interesting people. I don't know if you know Anthony Samerhoff, but he connected me with a tour guide in India. And I'm sure you all are familiar with the situation with COVID in India, which has been terrible. I was not familiar with how bad the lockdowns were in India. And this gentleman was telling me that when they did the lockdowns in India, when COVID got bad, this was back in, I guess, April or May of 2020, they gave 4 hours warning for locking down the entire country. And I don't know a lot about India, but the way he explained it to me is basically a lot of the manual laborers who live in the villages,
Hmm.
they'll live, I mean, they live basically in the city, families in the village. So, occasionally they'll make their way back on a bus or some sort of transportation back to their village. But when everything was shut down in these cities and they had nowhere to go, they had nowhere to eat, you had hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people migrating their way from these major cities and they shut down buses, trains, all sorts of transportation. These people didn't have cars, walking back to their villages. And he said it was the gentleman I interviewed said his name's Hermanshu Shaker. He said it was so loud. His home was close to a major street, so loud with the amount of people walking by and just crying out for food and just carrying their children on their back, that he could not sleep for a week. And
Wow.
I mean, that's a minor amount of suffering for him. He had a home, and he admits that he had a place to stay and a place to sleep and food to eat. And he went out in the street and shared as much as he could with the people passing by. But a lot of people just died on that journey. Thousands and thousands of people just died in the street. So I mean, we complain about the U.S. government and the lockdowns here, which obviously not good, not defending the lockdowns, but the situation in other countries and the situation post COVID with the supply chain interruptions and people not being able to get food, especially in poorer nations, is so much worse. And somehow I turned that question into a rant against the governments of the world, but that'll happen.
No, it's understandable because that's one of the things I've discussed with some other folks that knock on wood, if we can even say at this point that, well, there's still some places that there's a lot of chicanery going on, but most of this country is at least trying to move back towards some sense of normalcy. But if you woke up tomorrow and everyone mutually agreed, okay, there's not going to be any lockdowns or mandates, COVID is defeated, it's time to move on with life. Even when that day comes, there's going to be a fallout from the actions that have taken place, primarily from governments. That's going to result, because I mean, you're thinking of the trickle down effect of developing worlds and third worlds, where you had people living hand to mouth who, if those people take a week off, they're dead, or their children starve, and so that's not a realistic outcome. But then think of some more milquetoast things, but still important. You think of all of the potential contract situations where people either could not or would not fulfill their obligations, and you think of the literally millions of bankruptcies and the millions of lawsuits that are going to be coming down the pipe. It reminds me of the saying of, when times are good, lawyers get rich, and when times are bad, lawyers get rich, which is exactly what's about to happen. It's just the unforeseen circumstance, or the unforeseen consequences of having these monumental shifts in policy and these edicts by the point of a gun by states, that then you're going to then be left with all of these people who are affected, but different people will be affected in different severity, and there's going to be different people wanting to file suit with one another, or with their cities or their states or their counties or whatever, and you're going to see the fallout of this from a legal or a legislative context for years to come, I would imagine.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't want to spin finding freedom as being a downer, talking about only lockdowns. Also, I've had a chance to talk to a few documentary filmmakers. A doc that just came out recently. I'm not sure if it's on Amazon yet, but it's on a bunch of different outlets. It's called "They Say It Can't Be Done," and what it does is it follows around 5 different entrepreneurial businesses, from a business that builds trees, synthetic trees that take CO2 out of the air, like something like 100 times more CO2 than a natural tree would. The ability to grow organs, like almost like 3D printing organs, which is honestly at this point they're able to do it, but it's not at a point that it's scalable yet. And the regulation hurdles that are in the way of that, I don't know how they're ever going to do it at scale in the future, unless we change the way that we regulate in this country. But one that was really interesting is sea farming, just growing. They're able to like drop down in the ocean, and with kelp and things, they able. I guess it was mussels, and there's really, I think that it's actually a positive energy relationship there. It's actually, you're actually gaining energy by doing it. There's other regulatory hurdles there that made it problematic to scale that as well. But I think that's probably more likely to become something that's scaled. Then the one thing that I kind of go back and forth on this one is growing meat. Not just getting your meat from traditional animals, but growing meat. And essentially what they do is they feed the meat tissue, directly, the plant matter that an animal would eat, but in cellular form, which, it's probably not my thing. I can't see myself really eating that kind of meat unless that's all there is, and I don't have a choice. But it should be an option. I mean, if people want to eat it, and as long as we're not being tricked into eating it through nefarious labeling practices. But yeah, I mean, free market should be out there. People should be allowed to do it, as long as they're not harming anyone or anything by doing it, and not not committing fraud in any way. But there's, of course, you have the meat lobby pushing back and saying that it's they're claiming it's meat when it's not. But really, that's a false dichotomy, because they're not going to claim it's meat, because their whole thing is that it's different, it's more sustainable. I think it would be true competition. But anyway, that's a really exciting documentary. Really encourage people to check it out. And it's been like we were talking about at the beginning, after being kind of sucked into one focus, one topic, the criminal justice system, and hearing these stories, which, like you said, actually some of them very inspiring, but still dealing with the frustrations of feeling helpless to really change anything. And sure, I can give a platform, but what can I do to actually help to initiate change? But being able to step out with Finding Freedom and be able to talk to some people who are making these exciting documentaries, or talking to local business owners, talking to people like yourself, just having a conversation with you about the changes in NCAA sports and the SCOTUS ruling. It's been a breath of fresh air.
So on that note, guys, we're going to be right back with more from John Odermatt to play another round of Would You Eat That? Right after this commercial break. Don't go away. If you're enjoying tonight's show, consider supporting the program by becoming a member of our Patreon. That's over at patreon.com/Alan Mosley. Good job, Sherry. I knew you wouldn't forget. Guys, we're back with John Odermatt from Lions of Liberty Network, the host of Finding Freedom. Just a really quick question I have for you, John, that's related to something we talked about, specifically on Finding Freedom. So I know that sort of the focus of that, you're talking about not being a downer all the time, which I know you were subtweeting us when you said that. But trying to find some optimism and talk to people, talk to real people who have been, on the front lines dealing with some things going on in the world. Where do you, and this is a personal question for you more, but you might have some folks you've interviewed as examples. Where do you fall on kind of the, not really debate, but kind of the question of having your principles, having your preferences, wanting to live a certain life, but also having to face reality and having to pick your battles because, obviously your health and safety and your family's health and safety is paramount over, what your political philosophy might be. And I feel like a lot of people, those types of things have really been challenged, this last year and a half, I would say, with, because of things that are largely outside of a lot of our control. Where do you fall on that?
Yeah, I think it's I think it's a different situation for different people depending on their circumstances. Um, there's some things that, if I didn't have a wife and a daughter, I might take more risks and live a more free life. I might be like Vin Armani and pick up and move to Saipan or something like that. But not everyone can do that. Not everyone's able to make that happen. To pick up and maybe move to a foreign country if they want to, or maybe take some riskier, you know, chances with things like maybe not paying taxes or maybe participating in more black market trade of some kind. I kind of think that that's up to the individual. I'm not going to advise anyone to do something that's going to make them uncomfortable or put them in a situation where they don't want to be. I shouldn't say uncomfortable, because I feel like people should try to live a life where you are uncomfortable. I mean, I think the more uncomfortable situations you can put yourself in, probably the better life you're going to have at the end of the day. So I take that back. Be uncomfortable, but be you gotta live within your own value system, and you have to take care of the people who depend on you. So I think I answered your question. I'm not sure.
No, I understand completely. I think the catalyst for that, I'll actually just tell you. I happened to see a headline that was on the Hill right as we were getting ready to get started tonight. And the headline was talking about there was a hospital down in Houston where 153 healthcare workers in that
Mm.
hospital chain either had to resign or were fired because they refused the jab. And so that relates a little bit to talking about some of the things you talk about, and just some societal issues, and specifically for this, who bodily autonomy versus the right of a business or an employer. And I mean, and you've seen this kind of, you've seen the various arguments for bake the cake versus private business, or social media censorship versus private business, and that sort of thing. But I think especially with the kind of age of COVID, it's really ramped up a lot of that stuff to an 11, where you have these dividing lines. And it reminds me of something that Michael Malice talks about a lot, where he says the ideological self-segregation of the country is coming along nicely. Do you see that a little bit, where you see that partly because there's always been different peoples and different cultures nationwide, but also because of polarized politics bearing down on us more now than perhaps ever before, that you're seeing this split into different peoples? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And just to talk about the vaccine for a moment, I think the vaccine, it's a catalyst that has divided groups in ways that I wasn't even sure. I wasn't expecting to see the divide happen that way. There's people who I thought would be 100% for getting the vaccine, who are on the other side of it. So there's surprising things in that way. Myself personally, when you talk about, if I was forced to get a vaccine or continue working at my day job, I would leave my day job and they can keep their vaccine. That's me personally. I mean, I totally understand people who would make the opposite choice, and I would just use that as more motivation to make money in my different income streams. And I think people should be doing that anyway, because something that I do talk about is, I think the war on drugs is shifting from a war that prohibits what you can put in your body to a war that requires, what you must put in your body.
Mhm.
And I think we're approaching that tipping point right now. And there's a huge divide happening in this country. There is sort of like a gray middle ground right now, which I think will be pushed to one side or the other. And that gray middle ground is the people who are, comply with the lockdowns, basically favor the lockdowns. They're willing to go out and get the vaccine, maybe this one time. They probably don't want to get their children vaccinated, but if they get pushed too far, I think they will come, screaming back to the other side. And it just came out yesterday, I believe. So we're recording this on the 22nd, so the 21st, that the WHO, the World Health Organization, was no longer recommending that children under 18 should get vaccinated. Anthony Fauci and the U.S. government have not updated their recommendations yet. I know in the UK is not vaccinating children under 18. And of course, there's all of these, cases coming out of especially boys developing heart inflammation. I think it's called myocarditis or something like that, which is, it's not, it should heal over time, but that's not a good thing. It's not a good thing for a healthy, 16-year-old kid to get a vaccine, then all of a sudden be in the hospital with heart problems. That's a concern, because that's just the seen. That's what you're seeing. What's the unseen? What else is happening in the body? What else is this vaccine doing? Not to go 100% anti-vax, but I'm not an anti-vaxxer per se, but I am anti the COVID vax, if that makes sense.
No, it does. I mean, that speaks a lot to, the use of language and how the powers that be that we oppose, them controlling social media conglomerates and corporate press. There's a reason why they're the enemy of the people, because someone who has a legitimate concern about a vaccine, but it's not like they're walking around fearing polio because they did in fact get a polio vaccine. That's not an anti-vaxxer. That's someone with a concern. And maybe their concern is totally unfounded and the vaccine is great, but we don't know that today. But to take someone who, out of 100 vaccines, they're okay with 99 of them and they're not okay with one, that's not an anti-vaxxer. But our political and philosophical opponents won't make that nuanced distinction, will they? Of course. They'll say you're an anti-vaxxer, you're a kook, don't listen to this crazy guy. Or at the very least, maybe their narrative transforms, but in the meantime, you're deplatformed, you're banned, you're off of YouTube, and of course, you'll have to hold your breath if you think you're going to be getting an apology 6 months later when they change their guidelines.
No, exactly. And yes, they will kick you off of all the platforms. And they did that to anybody who, just 6 months ago was saying, this was probably created in a lab. You couldn't even say that on social media.
Nope.
Now, all of a sudden, even Anthony Fauci is saying, yeah, you know what? It might have been created in a lab.
John, where can people go to follow you and support you and listen to Finding Freedom?
Yeah, you can find me wherever you find your podcasts. You can find the Lions of Liberty. Finding Freedom is on that podcast network. And it's published every Thursday. So we have the 3 shows every Monday. Mark Claire's show, which is our flagship program, longest running program. Wednesday is Electric Liberty Land, hosted by Brian McWilliams. That's more of a current events type show. Warning, if you have small children, probably don't listen to that with the children. Brian does curse a little bit. So just so you know. And then Thursday, Finding Freedom. You can also, if people still go to websites, I don't know if people do, you can go to lionsofliberty.com and you can find the show notes there and find our video content and all that good stuff.
We're going to get you out of here on this one. If you have 2 separate lasagnas and then you stack one of the lasagnas on top of another lasagna, is it still 2 lasagnas or is it now a lasagna?
Can I ask a qualifying question?
Sure.
Was the lasagna heated again after it was stacked?
I'll be interested to hear if it makes any difference to you what the answer to that qualifying question is.
I would say if you served me, if I saw you cut a piece of lasagna, cut another piece of lasagna, and then put them on top of each other and give it to me, I would say that is 2 lasagnas. But if you took one lasagna and then you took another full lasagna, put them on top of each other, put them back in the oven, baked them, took it out, the magic baking stuff makes it 1 lasagna, and that's what it is.
All right. Well, so the correct answer is it is just now a lasagna, but we now have a separate faction. There's no liberty unity here, folks. There's now a separate faction that believes that it will only qualify as a single lasagna if it has been gone back into the prepare process and it has been sealed by the tomatoey cheesy goodness.
Indeed. Look, a little more cheese sprinkled on top doesn't hurt either.
John, thank you so much, guys. We're going to be right back to wrap up the show right after this break. Don't go away. Hi guys, it's Alan here, and I want to take a moment to let you know about one of our supporters who started a new business. Laura Moreau sells 50 different health and wellness all-natural products, from weight loss, supplements, energy enhancers, body toning, longer and stronger hair, and so much more. Do you like coffee? Well, they even have coffee that'll help you drop some pounds. And who doesn't want to drop a few pounds? Go check her out at her online store at lauramoreau.itworks.com today. That's lauramoreau.itworks.com. You can like our Facebook page. It's facebook.com/AlanMosleyTV. You can follow me on Twitter. It's twitter.com/AlanMosleyTV. Subscribe to our YouTube page. It's youtube.com/AlanMosleyTV. So also, guys, remember, you can follow us on Odyssey as well. That's odyssey.com/AlanMosleyTV. Don't just complain about free speech platforms. Go and support one. It's odyssey.com/AlanMosleyTV. As well as, if you're a listener more than a watcher, you can listen on your favorite podcasting platform of choice thanks to Anchor FM. It's anchor.fm/AlanMosleyTV. Well, that was good. John's one of us, I think.
Yeah, he was great.
Do you have a final thought?
Not really.
So, there. Do you have a final thought? Jesus Christ. This is what happens when you go to... First of all, you didn't just go. You went to Texas, for God's sakes.
I did go to Texas.
You didn't drink the water, did you? Well, you're still doing it. You're still doing it. You're making us have to refilm the show, but we're not going to at this point because we're in the finale.
There we go.
Guys, thank you so much, and we will see you next week.